The Young and the Restless, spoilers, pleases, subscribes, like, and share video. And now a silent secret connecting Summer Newman and Patty Williams is beginning to surface in the most explosive way possible. Summer had left Genoa to escape the pressure, but with her family in danger, she was ready to return immediately. Patty had almost 90% of the battle won, and nothing could change anymore. Jack thought he was doomed, but Summer appeared and helped him. Hidden somewhere in her tumultuous past was a disturbing connection that led straight back to Summer. For a long time, that connection remained buried, obscured by the scandals and tragedies that constantly rocked the city. However, secrets always find a way back when the time is right. As Jack stammered, unsure how to answer, the barrage of questions from Kyle, Diane, and Billy Summer burst through the door. "Summer, why are you here?" Kyle asked, surprised. But no one expected that the one who would shatter the fragile balance of the situation would be Summer. When Summer suddenly appeared in the very room where Patty was hiding, the moment seemed unreal. Patty's face was the most surprised, the most terrified, distorted, and completely devoid of color. Patty slowly turned her head, and upon seeing Summer standing there, something in her expression changed instantly. The confidence she had clung to for so long crumbled into utter fear. Summer, enraged, slapped Patty hard across the face and screamed, "Get out, you fraud! You're a murderer!" It wasn't just an act of anger. It was the release of years of buried truth finally being revealed. Patty staggered, shocked not only by the slap, but also by the person who had struck her. Her eyes widened, a mixture of fear and disbelief, because Summer shouldn't know. But Summer's expression clearly showed she knew everything. Summer said, "It was all a scam. Don't trust Patty. He was hired by Victor to stage it all. Look at the camera. Victor was behind it all." The room fell into a suffocating silence as the story unfolded. Years ago, when Summer was young and vulnerable, Patty's actions were never just random outbursts. Some of the things she did, some of the risks she took with Summer's life were connected to something far more calculated. Behind the chaos lay a shadow of manipulation, a subtle influence from someone powerful enough to shape events from behind the scenes. Victor Newman. The name alone changed everything. Summer revealed that Victor had viewed Patty not just as a troubled woman, but as a tool, someone unstable enough to be manipulated, yet devoted enough to commit acts others would never dare to do. In Victor's relentless pursuit of power, even the most dangerous individuals could be useful if directed in the right direction. Patty's obsession with Jack provided the perfect opportunity. Summer's revelation was terrifying because it showed just how far Victor's influence had spread. Some of what once seemed like random acts of madness now appeared alarming due to their strategic nature. Patty might have believed she acted out of love or revenge, but in reality, she may have been instigated, encouraged, or subtly manipulated by someone who understood exactly how to exploit her instability. When Summer finished speaking, Patty looked utterly devastated. The fear in her eyes was no longer because of the slap. It was because the truth had finally been revealed. The fragile illusion she had built around her actions began to crumble as she realized that the only person who should never have known the whole story now knew it all. But the most shocking part of this moment wasn't the secret itself. It was Summer's decision. For most of her life, Summer had remained firmly within the powerful sphere of influence of the Newman family. Being a member of the Newman family meant loyalty, privilege, and protection. Giving up that status wasn't easy for anyone, yet standing there to protect Jack Summer was clearly ready to do so. The rhythmic, hollow slapping of the dark ocean waves against the fiberglass hull of the luxury yacht did nothing to mask the suffocating tension inside the main cabin. The vessel adrift in an undisclosed location far from the shores of Genoa City was a floating prison. Inside, the air was thick with the cloying scent of sea salt and the sharp medicinal tang of whatever sedative had been pumped into the veins of Jack Abbott. He lay slumped against the plush leather seating of the banquette, his usually sharp features slack, his breathing shallow and uneven. Hovering over him with a manic, almost reverent intensity was Patty Williams. Her eyes darted around the cabin, her hands trembling as she smoothed the lapels of Jack's wrinkled suit. "Oh, Jack," Patty whispered, her voice a fragile sing-song melody that belied the madness beneath. "We're finally together, away from all the noise, away from him." The heavy mahogany door of the cabin suddenly burst open, slamming against the bulkhead with a violent crack that echoed like a gunshot over the water. The sea breeze howled into the room, bringing with it the furious, breathless form of Summer Newman. Patty shrieked, spinning around, her hands flying to her face. "No, you can't be here. He said no one would find us." Summer stood in the doorway, her blonde hair whipped into a frenzy by the wind, her chest heaving as she caught her breath. She had tracked the offshore accounts, bribed the harbor master, and chartered a speedboat through treacherous waters to get here, driven by a sickening adrenaline that had yet to fade. Her eyes locked onto Jack's semi-conscious form, a flash of profound relief washing over her, immediately followed by a surge of white-hot fury as her gaze shifted to the woman guarding him. "Step away from him," Patty Summer commanded, her voice vibrating with an authority that eerily mirrored the grandfather she was about to destroy. She stepped fully into the cabin, the heavy door clicking shut behind her, sealing the three of them in the claustrophobic space. "It's over." "You don't understand," Patty cried, backing up against the polished wood paneling, her eyes wide and frantic. "Victor promised. He promised me that if I just kept Jack safe, kept him out of the way, we could be happy. You're ruining it, Summer. You're ruining everything." Summer closed the distance between them, her designer heels clicking sharply against the teak floorboards. She didn't flinch at the mention of her grandfather's name. Instead, her jaw set into a rigid line. The very mention of Victor Newman sent a wave of nausea rolling through her stomach. "Victor promised you." Summer scoffed, her tone dripping with a venom she usually reserved for her worst enemies, not a broken woman. "When has Victor Newman ever kept a promise to anyone but himself?" "Look at what you're doing, Patty. Look at him." She pointed a trembling finger at Jack, who was groaning softly, his eyelids fluttering as he fought through the chemical fog. "He's heavily drugged. He's a hostage. And you are playing the willing executioner for my grandfather's sick vendettas all over again." "I'm not," Patty whimpered, shaking her head so violently her hair fell out of its messy clasp. "I love Jack. I've always loved him. Victor he just helped me see that this was the only way to protect him from the world." "Protect him." Summer stepped closer, invading Patty's personal space, her eyes blazing with a relentless fire. "Is that what you call it? Is that what you called it years ago when you helped Victor destroy his life, when you helped Victor take away his freedom?" Patty froze, the manic energy draining from her face, leaving behind a stark, terrified pallor. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Summer screamed, the sound tearing from her throat, raw and agonizing. "Don't you dare stand there and play the innocent, confused victim with me, Patty. I know everything. I know exactly what you did for Victor. I know about the dark, filthy secrets you two have buried. I know about the stock certificates." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Patty let out a strangled gasp, her hands dropping to her sides as if she had been physically struck. On the banquette, Jack let out a low, ragged cough. The mention of the word stocks seemed to pierce through the heavy veil of sedatives clouding his brain. His head lolled to the side, his unfocused eyes trying desperately to latch onto Summer's face. You can't know about that," Patty whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the yacht's generator. That was so long ago. It's gone. It's buried." "Nothing is ever buried with Victor Newman." Summer retaliated, her voice dropping to a lethal, icy register. "He keeps everything, every piece of leverage, every dirty deed. He forced you to forge those stock certificates, didn't he? He knew your mental state was fragile. He knew you were desperate, and he weaponized you. He made you create those flawless forgeries, and then he planted the evidence to make it look like Jack orchestrated the entire fraud." Tears began to spill down Patty's cheeks, leaving shiny tracks on her pale skin. "He made me," he said, "if I didn't." He sent Jack to prison. Summer's voice broke the sheer weight of the tragedy crashing down on her. "Jack Abbott, a man who loved me, a man who helped raise me, spent years rotting in a federal penitentiary because of a crime he did not commit. He lost his company, he lost his reputation, he lost years of his life, all because my grandfather wanted to win a corporate game, and he used your hands to deal the fatal blow." Jack groaned louder this time, his hands gripping the edge of the leather cushion. Summer, his voice was a raspy sandpaper whisper. The drugs were losing their grip, chased away by the shocking adrenaline of the conversation he was half hearing. What are you saying? Summer turned to Jack, her eyes softening for a fraction of a second before the hardened resolve returned. I found it, Jack. I found the proof. All of it. She turned back to Patty, her posture rigid, projecting a terrifying dominance. You want to know how I found out, Patty? It was an accident. A stupid, fateful accident. I was at the ranch. I went into Victor's private study to look for a family trust document. He had left his personal wall safe open just a crack. The great infallible Victor Newman made a mistake. I opened it. Summer paused, swallowing hard against the bile rising in her throat as she recalled the musty smell of the old yellowed papers. There was a lockbox at the very back. Inside, I found the original drafts of the forged certificates. I found the bank transfer records showing the offshore payments Victor made to cover your tracks. I found audio cassettes, Patty, tapes of Victor instructing you on exactly how to mimic the signatures, threatening to have you locked away in a psychiatric ward for the rest of your life if you didn't comply. Patty clamped her hands over her ears, sobbing uncontrollably. Now, stop it. Don't say it out loud. If he hears you, he'll kill us all. He's not here, Summer yelled, prying Patty's hands away from her face. Look at me. I held the evidence in my hands. I saw the undeniable proof of the conspiracy that ruined Jack's life. I saw the absolute, undeniable proof that my grandfather is a monster. Summer stepped back, running a trembling hand through her hair. The reality of what she was doing, of the bridge she was burning, settled over her shoulders like a lead weight. But she didn't falter. For my entire life, Summer began, her voice trembling but resolute. I have defended that man. I have stood by Victor Newman because he was my grandfather. I turned a blind eye to his ruthless business tactics. I made excuses for his controlling nature. I told myself that underneath the cold, calculating exterior of the mustache, there was a man who fiercely loved his family. But there is no love in Victor Newman. There is only possession, control, and an endless, bottomless cruelty. She looked at Jack, who was now struggling to push himself up into a sitting position, his blue eyes widening as the horrific truth anchored itself in his conscious mind. I am done. Summer declared, the words ringing out with absolute finality. I am walking away from the Newman family. I refuse to carry a name that is synonymous with such profound evil. I cannot look at my father, my aunts, my uncles, and pretend that our legacy isn't built on the destroyed lives of innocent people. I will not accept his deception anymore. From this moment on, I am not a Newman. I am severing myself from that toxic bloodline forever. Patty collapsed onto a velvet ottoman, her body folding in on itself as she wept. The grand delusion she had built, the fantasy world where she and Jack could sail away into the sunset, was shattering into a million jagged pieces around her. You think it was easy for me? Patty cried out, her voice a desperate, pleading whine. She looked up at Summer, her eyes begging for a sliver of understanding. You think I wanted to hurt Jack? I was sick. Summer, I was so sick and I was so alone. Victor found me when I was at my lowest. He didn't just threaten me, he manipulated my mind. He twisted everything until I couldn't tell what was real and what was a hallucination. Patty wrung her hands together, her knuckles turning white. He told me that Jack was going to be destroyed by the corporate world anyway. He convinced me that if Jack went away for a little while, it would save him from a worse fate. And then, when the forgery was done, Victor changed the narrative. He told me that if I ever breathed a word, he would make sure I never saw the light of day. He would throw me in a padded cell and throw away the key. I was his puppet. He pulled my strings, and I danced because I was terrified of the dark. You still made the choice, Patty Summers said. Coldly, though a flicker of pity crossed her features, you still held the pen. You still let a good man lose everything. My God. The voice was rough, gravelly, and filled with an agonizing mix of horror and heartbreak. Summer and Patty both turned to see Jack fully upright now. The heavy sedation was completely burned away by the sheer, unadulterated shock of the revelation. He clutched the edge of the table, his knuckles pale, his chest heaving as he stared at Patty and then at Summer. The forgery. Jack breathed the memories of that dark, desperate time flooding back into his mind. The cold steel of the handcuffs, the sterile, hopeless walls of the prison cell, the absolute despair of losing Jabot, of losing his family's trust, of being branded a criminal for the world to see. I spent years of my life in a cage. I missed milestones. I lost time I can never ever get back, and it was all a lie. He looked at Patty, his eyes filled with a disgust so profound it made her shrink back against the wall. You did that to me. You who claimed to love me. You conspired with Victor to bury me alive. Jack, please, Patty wailed, reaching out a hand toward him. I was sick. He made me... Don't touch me, Jack roared, the sound echoing fiercely in the small cabin. He turned his gaze to Summer, the young woman who was technically a Newman, the daughter of his eternal rival's son, standing before him as his savior. Summer, you found the proof. You have it. I have it, Jack Summer said softly, stepping toward him and placing a gentle, reassuring hand on his shoulder. I made copies of everything. The originals are locked in a secure safety deposit box that Victor doesn't know about. The digital files are encrypted on a drive in my purse. Jack let out a shaky breath, closing his eyes as a single tear escaped, tracing the lines of his weathered face. It was a tear of grief for the years lost, but also a tear of vindication. The truth was finally in the light. What are you going to do with it? Jack asked, his voice steadying the familiar, commanding cadence of the Abbott patriarch returning to him. Summer's expression hardened into a mask of pure, unbreakable resolve. I am going to burn his empire to the ground. She turned away from Jack, pacing the length of the cabin, the energy radiating from her practically crackling in the air. I am going to the press, Jack, the Genoa City Chronicle, GC Buzz, the national syndicates. I am taking the documents straight to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI, and the district attorney. I am going to publicly expose Victor Newman for the criminal, the manipulator, and the monster that he is. Patty gasped, her eyes rolling back slightly as she hyperventilated. No, the scandal. It will destroy everything. That is exactly the point, Summer snapped. This is going to be an earthquake, Patty. A massive, catastrophic earthquake that will shatter the Newman family and vindicate the Abbotts once and for all. Victor will be stripped of his company, his legacy, and his freedom. He will rot in a cell just like he made Jack do. The silence that followed Summer's declaration was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the hull. The air in the cabin felt fundamentally altered, charged with the electricity of a shifting paradigm. The relationships that had defined Genoa City for decades were standing at a fateful, turbulent crossroads. Summer Newman, the golden granddaughter, was actively orchestrating the downfall of her own bloodline. She was choosing truth over loyalty, justice over family. By aligning herself with Jack Abbott, she was crossing a line from which there could be no return. Her mother Phyllis, her father Nick, her aunt Victoria, they would all be caught in the devastating crossfire of the bomb she was about to detonate. Jack looked at Summer, seeing not the child he had once helped raise, but a formidable, terrifyingly strong woman who possessed the best parts of her mother's fire, and ironically, the strategic brilliance of the grandfather she was about to destroy. Summer, Jack said, his voice thick with emotion. If you do this, Victor will come after you. He will unleash a wrath unlike anything you have ever seen. You will lose your family. Summer looked back at him, her chin held high, her eyes shining with unshed tears and unyielding courage. I already lost them, Jack. The moment I opened that safe and saw what he did to you, I realized the family I thought I had never really existed. It was all a mirage built on pain and lies. She reached out, grabbing Jack's arm and pulling him up to his feet. He swayed slightly, but her grip was firm, anchoring him. Come on, Summer said, her voice cutting through the lingering shadows of the cabin. I have a speedboat tied to the stern. We are going back to Genoa City, and then we are going to war. Patty remained on the floor, weeping into her hands, a forgotten casualty in the wake of the storm. As Summer and Jack stepped out of the cabin and into the harsh, glaring sunlight of the open sea, the horizon stretched before them, ominous, uncertain, and forever changed. The decades-long feud between the Newmans and the Abbotts was no longer just a corporate chess match. It was a battle for survival, and Summer had just made the opening move that would bring the entire board crashing down.